I'm here with author Bonika Wilson, and Bonika has this super cool book out that it definitely left me thinking about my life a little bit more deeply. It's all about love, business, and the business side of love. So I'm super excited to share this with you all today. Bonika, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you for having me, Alyssa.
Yay, yay, yay. Awesome. So I want to jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about your book. Who exactly is this book for, and what can readers benefit from this book?
Absolutely. The book is really for um, people who are either thinking about marriage, like they're engaged, or they're newly married, or they're looking to just take their marriage to another level. So that's really who the book is for. And then the other question was,
How can readers benefit from the book, and kind of give us a little bit of a synopsis behind the book?
sure. So the book is, you talked a little bit about it, marriage strategies and trying to apply a business strategies to marriage. So the name of the book is Marriage Business, and the subtitle is From Proposal to Prosperity, Building Your Dynasty the Fortune 500 Way. And basically, the whole concept of the book is, for 28 years, Alyssa, I have been a business consultant, whether it was on the financial side of business and commercial banking, or as a human capital management organization consultant, doing strategic planning for businesses. So either way, I've been working with businesses for the past 28 years. And what I learned from just kind of working with businesses and working with people in general is that people that are successful usually have a plan, right? So I always use this kind of analogy, and I say that successful teams have a game plan, successful buildings have a floor plan, and successful businesses have a business plan. But what does successful marriages have? We have love. That's not enough. So we really need a marriage plan. So the marriage business book is about applying successful business practices to your marriage, having a strategy for your marriage, having a vision, having core values, being driven from that perspective, checking in. So successful businesses, they have performance appraisals for their employees. Well, we don't have performance appraisals in our marriage, but we call them accountability sessions, accountability sessions in the book. We don't want to hold count, but we want to help mount each other up and help the sum amount have more from our marriage. So we call them accountability sessions. So it's all about kind of applying successful business practices to your marriage so that you can have a winning marriage. So it's all about having a winning formula for your marriage.
Absolutely. I think this is such an incredible book. Just even hearing you summarize it really just has my mind thinking about how many kind of, I guess, work practices I take from work and apply it to my marriage. And just how many times my husband and we've butt heads, and I'm trying to tell him we should try things this way. And it finally clicks, and he's like, why was I fighting you on this? Like this system or checking in, it really does help. And it's what keeps a marriage healthy and alive. And, one of the things that rings true, especially when you were just kind of summarizing everything, is that love is not easy. Like everyone thinks love is hearts and happiness. Love is work. It's a job in itself. So there should be business
Absolutely.
involved. It's
Absolutely.
incredible. How
You're
did you
right.
come up, like, where did the correlation happen for you where you're like, wait a minute, like, I think applying business to a marriage, like, I think there's something here. When was that moment, or what was inspiration striking you? Like, when did that happen?
Great question. I'm glad you asked. So what happened was I was seen as a fixer, right? In a business consulting world, companies came to me really to fix things, whether it was we're having financial constraints and we need a business line of credit, or we need to optimize, our sales so that we're getting our revenue in earlier because it's constricting our cash. So that was on the commercial business side. And then when I started doing business strategy, it was, we don't really have a plan for our growth. We're growing too fast. We need to scale, all of those things. And one day I'm at the office, Alyssa, and my girlfriend calls and, I'm at the office actually at my desk. And she's like complaining about her marriage. And I was like, I'm a business fixer, but I'm not like a marriage fixer. But you know what? If I could tell her, so let's go back to the core values. Let's go back to the business plan, the plan for this marriage, like what the foundation was. And then I thought about that. It was funny and kind of in the moment, like, oh, let's go to like the core values that drove you to this relationship. When I tell my businesses who have problems, let's go back to your business plan. Let's go back to the core values, what the foundation and the mission of this organization was. If I could say, Alyssa, when you got married to your husband, I know you're recently married, just a few years in, because I was reading about you. And so, if I said, Alyssa, go back to the core values and the mission of the marriage, that would be kind of funny. But then I thought that might not be so funny. Actually, if we could go back to the founding of our relationship and think about all of those things that probably drew you to your spouse or your significant other and said, we were equally aligned in some things. There was something that drew you to your spouse, right? And so kind of going back to what that was, what the purpose was then, what you thought about from, this marriage and what the legacy of this marriage would be. We probably didn't capture all those things, but there probably were some things there in the beginning that drew you to that person, that attracted you to that person, some like-kind things. And so if you start actually putting concepts into practice and saying, okay, we're going to be strategic about that. We are going to have core values. What are your values as an individual? How do they align with mine? What are your vision for this marriage? What is our mission? Like outside of being married and loving each other and maybe having children one day, what do we want to leave when we're gone beyond our children? And what kind of values do we want to give them? And you start putting that into place and actually creating a plan for that. Then when you get off track, after the kids or after, several homes and purchases and aging parents and all the things that life will throw you, you get off track sometime because life just kind of lifes, life is life. And like people say, and when you get off track, it's awesome to be able to say, let's go back to our core values. Let's go back to our founding principles and say, what was it that really we wanted to do? What did we want to leave? What was our legacy planning? And let's get back on track and start from that as the foundation. And when I started applying those concepts, it was a game changer in my own marriage. I mean, I've been married 23 years, Alyssa, and I probably haven't got it right until like the last 7 years after I started applying these concepts. But what I do not want is for other people to wait for 20 years or 18 years before they start figuring it out. So I'm like, you know what? This is working. Let's put it together. I'm going to create the book. I'm going to create a blueprint for people so that they don't have to figure this thing out on their own. And it's working. And I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. You know how you have a hypothesis and you think it might work, but you're not quite sure if it will work. Well, I'm actually like the tried and true results and outcome of, yes, this actually works. And it's changed my marriage, Alyssa, for real. Like, in all honesty, I feel like I have a new marriage with the same man after applying these concepts. So it's game changer. And I'm happy to, finally have the blueprint in a manuscript and have it published soon. And we're really excited about just being able to help other couples figure this thing out. Marriage is very difficult, but it doesn't have to be so difficult if you have a plan, just like any other successful thing you have, like your career and your birth plan and all those things. We have plans for everything but marriage. It's crazy. Like, why don't we have this?
Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations. I mean, 23 years, that is so incredible. I know I often look to my parents for inspiration on marriage. They've been together for 35 years, I think. So
They need to write the
going
book.
strong, but they're very old school and traditional. And I definitely look to them, but I find myself saying, I'm not going to do that. I love their marriage. They have a really special relationship, but I'm like, it's a different time. It's a different age. I'm not doing that. We've got to do things differently. And that's why I think your book is just so refreshing. And like you said, it's really almost like a no-brainer. You're taking some of the hard work people struggle and trip over for years and decades through a relationship and even failed relationship, and then they try again, and you're really helping people navigate really what's, I would say, are simple concepts, but we gotten so far away from, I guess, love, and we're also self-driven, and it's so incredible. And you talked a little bit about how it's changed your marriage. What are some other things you learned along the way while writing this book?
Um, I would say, for me, just kind of, getting insights, like, was the easiest part, right? It came from the 20 years, in business. But I think the biggest thing I learned, and, you can research, kind of successful marriages. And I did a lot of that, researching successful marriages and the components of a successful marriage and obstacles that folks overcame in their marriages to glean advice. But I think the biggest thing I learned was, we can create this book, which we have, and it is a blueprint. And, but I talked about like successful teams who have game plans, and successful buildings that have floor plans, and successful businesses that have business plans. And you can have plans all day long, Alyssa, but what I really learned is that outside of the plan, you have to do the work, right? So successful teams, they have a game plan, but they practice every day. And so what I've learned from writing the book is, yes, it's great to have a plan. And yes, it's great to have somebody bought into the plan, but we have to do the work. Like, we have to go to practice every day so that on game day, we're ready. And so the work has to be done. I will say this about the book. Each chapter, it's like the template of the book is each chapter is kind of, we're presenting a concept, whether it's communication strategy, whether it's financial strategies, whether it's, we talk about stakeholder engagement. We use business concepts throughout the book because it's basically a business approach to marriage. And so we talk about the concept of what we're talking about in that chapter, financial, whatever it is. And you have working sessions in the book. So each chapter presents the concept, and then you and your spouse actually have, it's a workbook. You write out, you answer questions, there's activities in there for you and your spouse to do. When you walk away from this book, when you finish, you have a blueprint, you have your marriage plan, you have your strategic plan that you can say, we did the work. So the wonderful thing is, I make it easy for you, to not just have a plan. But like now you have the plan, now you've done some of the work. So you've already started implementing what we call practicing. So you've already started exercising some of the concepts in the book throughout the book, which is great because you walk away from the book, you're like a little expert, you're like, okay, we've been doing this. We talked about our financial strategy. We did a budget in that financial chapter. And communication strategy, we talked about what our brand is, how we want to show up as a couple, what that looks like. We talked about our stakeholders and who our board of directors and trustees and advisors are going to be in our marriage, who are our stakeholders, who are instrumental in supporting our marriage, and we're going to leverage them. You do the work. You see the concepts, but you do the work. So you walk away not only with a plan, but I knew from writing the book, practice was important. And so you walk away from the book with not just the plan, but also some of the practices of the book as well.
Absolutely. You mentioned there's activities in the book. What would you say is your favorite activity, and what would you say is the hardest activity for couples to kind of work through?
Oh, great question. Great question. I would say my favorite activity is one called the canvas visioning exercise. It's one early on in the book. And basically in that exercise, so I say to you as a spouse, if you're the woman and you're married to a man, and so I would say to the woman, if you think about your children, whether you have them today or not, if you were to have a son, what would you like for his wife to look like? And you draw it out, and you can either, if you're like me, you can't draw, you stick figure it out. And then I talk about like the attributes, like right characteristics of her. What will she look like? And I ask questions actually in the book to help you to kind of jar things about what you want for that person. If you're married to a husband and you say, I say to him, well, what do you want your daughter to have in a husband? What does that look like? Tell me about the characteristics. Does he work? Does he stay at home? Is he a coach at Little League? What does he look like? What does he make? Tell me about the characteristics of this man. Is he value driven? What does he pray? Like, does he not? Who does he go to for a higher source to hold him accountable? What does that look like? And you vision it, and you do the drawing. If you're a great artist, you draw it, but you also write words about this person. And then I talk about the visioning exercise throughout the book. Why? Because it is more important for us to become that person, right? So if I want this kind of wife for my son, and I visioned it, I created it, it's my vision map, it leads me through the book, I have to become her, because our kids don't become what we tell them to become. Like, they don't, go after this type of person, do this type of thing. They do what they see us do. Like, if I have good work ethic, if I clean up the table after my meal, if I push my seat in, my kid does not do what I tell him to do. He does what he sees me do, because he knows that that's important. If I take my shoes off when I walk in the house, and I'm telling him, it's not that, it's important to take your shoes off, but I never do it, then he's not going to do it. But if he sees me consistently taking my shoes off at the front door before I walk in the house, he sees it, okay, that's important in our house. I do it. They just kind of imitate what you do. So I talk about the canvas activity, and throughout the book, I say, go back to your vision, go back to your canvas vision. That's what you must become. In this section, as we're talking about communication strategies, as we're talking about financing strategies, what did that person look like that you had for your child? How do they budget? How do they manage money? That's who you have to become. And so that's one of my favorite activities, because it sets the stage for the rest of what you will do and what you think about throughout the rest of the book. And my worst one, I guess, or not the worst one, but I guess the hardest one, I would say, you said the hardest one, not the worst one, they're all great. But the hardest one, I think, is the budget. If you haven't already created a budget, is because we focus on not just your expenses and your revenue income. We talk about kind of like long-term planning strategies, investing, life insurance, all of the things, not just what's our expenses and our income and our expenses today, but like, how do we want to save for a house? How do we want to save for investments? Like, how do we want to save for our children when they go to school, and if they're not in independent school, college? And so if you haven't already done that hard work, it can get a little touchy when you start talking about, we're going to have a savings account and you're going to be on a budget and you can't spend this. And sometimes that's a little challenging for couples.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine. I know when my husband and I tried to merge our finances, not to, I guess, give too much information about myself, it did not work out, because I am very particular with my money, and we just were like, nope, it's not time yet. When we're both very comfortable and like ready, we'll revisit that topic, but it was too soon for me. So I will say I can definitely see finances being a hard one for a lot of couples to overcome. Now, I want to ask, when you're doing your research, you mentioned you were talking to a lot of couples that have successful marriages. What was kind of one lesson you learned, or was there a couple that stuck out to you, and why did they stick out to you?
I don't know that there was a couple that stuck out for me in particular, but I do think, well, in the book, I talk about celebrity couples as well. I use them throughout the book. And I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick Magic and Cookie Johnson as one of the couples that stuck out for me, because their story is one that, they went from kind of like the love and marriage and all of the things to like, we're just trying to save a life here. Like, that was the important thing. And one of the things I talk about in the book is mission. And I talk about either, your mission, you will define your mission for your marriage. Like, what do we want to leave? What's our legacy? Or your mission will find you. And I use them as an example of mission finding you, because I don't think Cookie, when she married, Magic, thought her mission would be like creating AIDS and AIDS prevention strategies and helping people understand the importance of safe sex. But eventually that became their mission in their marriage, and to, if not eliminate HIV and AIDS, it was really to help people understand how to protect themselves. And also, if they were a recipient of it, to understand how to be healthy in it and live a longer life with the disease. And so their mission kind of found them, right? They didn't find their mission, but I talk about that. And that's one of the couples, just interesting their story about triumph and all the trauma and going through all the things they went through, and how full circle where they are today and how they have a strong mission. But their story, if you read the book, you'll learn more about it. And actually, Cookie wrote a book called Believing in Magic, and I took a lot of information from that book. But just an amazing story and testimony of how mission is really important on the tough days in your marriage, right? You know, like on some days you probably you walk out and you're like, I'm not really happy with you today. But if you have a strong mission, it will help you overcome the tough days, because you know together you're creating a legacy and you're driven by doing things that are bigger than you guys together. It's gonna outlive you. And so I think on the tough days, you'll hear in that story a bit how that really was the driver. One, first it was him, you know, saving his life. Second, it was about saving other lives, and that became their mission. And that was bigger on a lot of the days, oftentimes bigger than their own trials for the day, their own tribulations for the day.
Absolutely. I have two questions. I promise we're wrapping up soon, but I have to first and foremost ask, what are you hoping readers take away from this? I know you talked about legacy and having a mission. What else are you hoping readers can take away from this book?
Oh my God, great question. So I think for me, the most important message in this book is that winning and success don't just happen, right? Successful teams, I talked about them having a game plan and all of this other stuff. I think for me, that the biggest takeaway for readers is that winning and success take place because we work at it. Our marriage takes work. We don't just, you know, go and we sign a marriage license and things are like a bliss, you know, a marital bliss. We love each other and it's a marital bliss. This thing takes a lot of work. But it doesn't have to be complicated, hard work. It is a lot of work. It doesn't have to be hard work. But I will say that the biggest thing is that success takes work, and that you cannot do this in isolation. You have to have your spouse bought into this idea of we're committed to having a successful winning marriage. Both people have to be bought into. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is those two things. It takes work and it takes two people. One person cannot fix, you know, or solve or have a successful winning marriage alone. We can't do this in isolation.
Absolutely. How can people get the book and stay in contact with you, see what you're doing?
Thank you. So the book will be out in late October, early November on Amazon and Audible. You can find out when and be the first to get all of the news and even some free giveaways of the book by following me on Instagram at The Business with B. And again, The Business with B on Instagram. And we're also on TikTok, and we will be doing giveaways, so a few book launches. So if you follow me there, you'll be the first to know about all of the latest and greatest news. And you will be eligible for some prizes as well, some wins, some free books. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Bonika. It has been such an enlightening conversation. I feel super recharged and refreshed and just excited to continue to evaluate my marriage and make sure we're heading in the right direction. Guys, if you want to stay up to date with me and all my exclusive conversations just like this one, be sure and download the free Odyssey app. That's AUDACY, and favorite Star 94 Atlanta, so you can stay up to date with conversations just like this. And make sure you follow Star 94 across all social media at Star 94 Atlanta. And of course, give me a follow at itsme_Alyssa D, and we'll see you guys next time.